Omaha Mom Talks, proudly sponsored by Day Ventures Swim School, where giggles and goggles unite. Hello and welcome back to Omaha Mom Talks. I'm your host, Jessie Gutierrez. If you've ever felt lost, overwhelmed, or just dismissed while trying to advocate for your child, you are not alone. Today's guest is someone who not only gets it, but is doing something about it. We are joined by Lauren Vargas. She's a mom, wife, special education advocate, and the powerhouse behind Education Rights Counsel. Lauren is the CEO and co-founder of ERC, where she leads a growing team of advocates fighting to ensure every child has access to education and support that they deserve. If you're walking through the school system and trying to be heard, Lauren is someone you want in your corner. So let's get into it. All right, Lauren, welcome to Omaha Mom Talks.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to chat with you and learn more about the awesome work that you're doing in our community.
I'm excited to kind of talk about Education Rights Counsel and what I do as an attorney, and then also just kind of share some tidbits of being a mom.
Yeah, well, let's start there. Tell us just a little bit about life as a human, a little bit about yourself and your sweet family.
Yeah, so I am a mother to a 4-year-old little boy named Luca and a daughter who is 6 named Ava. And so I feel like just like every other parent right now who is transitioning from toddlerhood, about to be on that brink to school age is really an interesting kind of change.
Yeah.
I just turned 40, so that's exciting. So
Happy
going
birthday.
in, thank you. It was last week. I appreciate that. And going into just kind of a new decade, right, of being a mother and understanding who I am, what my identity looks like as a professional, but also as a mom.
Yeah.
Where I feel like in my 30s, I maybe struggled with that a little more in becoming a mother and really trying to rectify like my professional life and my personal life. And so I feel really grounded and centered in where I am right now. And so I'm excited about this new decade of time.
There is something about those early years of motherhood and your professional identity that you're just pulled in these different, it's so polar opposite, right? Like you're passionate about your work and obviously you're just so in love with your babies and you want to do both and you want to give to both. But how do I give? How do I know what to give to and what needs me?
Yeah. And I think that people say, you can't have it all. I would disagree.
Okay.
I think that you can in moments. It just looks very chaotic, right?
Yeah.
I think that obviously some things are going to rise and some things are going to fall, like where you can give your attention. But I've been very fortunate and very supported by my family and my husband to be able to balance those things together.
Yeah. And tell us about your husband and how long you guys have been together.
Yeah. So my husband, his name is Tony Vargas. We have been together since 2009. So we both were educators. We both taught in New York City.
Okay.
And then we actually met on a plane. We had been hired by a national nonprofit and we were going to a conference. And so we sat next to each other on a plane and kind of the rest is history. So we've been together, I don't know how, I can't do the math, but like over 15 years.
Wow. That's so cool. You met on a plane.
Yeah, it is kind of fun.
That.
It's like a
cute meet.
Or like a meet cute,
yeah,
right?
Meet
That's
cute.
what they say.
Yeah,
it is. It's like one of those like dream things, especially coming into the city and then being like, oh, we work at the same place. So
are you born and raised from Omaha?
I am not actually. So my parents are both from Nebraska. My father's from Columbus and my mother is from Omaha. And I am one of several cousins, like over like 45, like 50 cousins across the state of Nebraska. And so I was actually raised in California. My parents moved in Orange County. Irvine. Anyway, so I was raised in Orange County, but I spent all my summers in Nebraska.
Oh, how funny.
So when my husband and I were in New York City, I went to school in Texas at Baylor and then moved to New York, but I lived there for about 8 years. And I was deciding where to go to law school. So I was a teacher in New York City. I taught in the Bronx, and I taught special education under an AmeriCorps program. An AmeriCorps program is similar to the Peace Corps, but essentially it says like, let's try to fix our own government, right? Let's try to fix, maybe not government, but our nation. And so they were looking and seeking for teachers to go into low income areas. I was not an education major by trade.
Oh, okay.
I was a history major and music major, and then applied to this program, kind of rapidly learned.
Wow.
And got my master's while being an educator, or while teaching.
So your
in the
master's is
classroom.
in
education.
Okay.
And special education. And so at that point, I also had become a teacher coach. So I was coaching teachers across the city, so in pretty much all boroughs except for Staten Island, and in all grade levels, pre-K all the way to high school or alternative schools, ensuring that kids were getting what they required and helping teachers be able to do that. And what I found through that experience is there was a lot of commonality between what the teachers were seeing with students. And so I really wanted to go to law school, and really specifically what had happened is when I was a teacher, I had a student who I talk about a lot. Her name was Barbara, and I wanted her to have more inclusion opportunities. She was very bright, but physically had some disabilities that did not enable her, or maybe made her bullied, etc. And so I had talked to the school district about what I could provide for her, and kind of was told, listen, sit down, shut up, right? Yeah. Like, you're a teacher, you don't know the law, you don't know what you're like talking about, we don't have the funding for that, etc. And so, you know, basically just like, know your place.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't know my place because I decided to go to law school. And so when I was trying to decide where to go to law school, I really wanted to be closer to family. And at that time, as I mentioned, a lot of my extended family was here. I was really only looking in California and Nebraska. And my husband, or my boyfriend at the time, Tony, was like, well, I really don't like California, so like, what if we try Nebraska and we'll kind of like see what happens? And he was doing education consulting at the time. Basically, districts would hire him to come in and look at their achievement goals and look at what was happening from a broader perspective, and then he would coach complete districts on how to get better outcomes for students. Anyway, so he was able to travel, and so we came here, and I went to Creighton Law School. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you guys decided you like Nebraska enough to stick around and raise your little fam here?
Yeah, I think lots of things happened. I think it was, obviously my family is here, so that is like one aspect that has been really grounding. I also think we came at a time, so we moved here in 2012, and I think we came at a time where Omaha saw a lot of growth. So tons of new buildings, tons of new like infrastructure.
Young professionals.
Yes, and I really think that I say this about Nebraska all the time, there's lots of opportunities here to do really cool, big things. And so at the time, I had gotten a job as a public defender, I was interning at the public defender's office under Tom Riley, and so was getting lots of court experience and litigation experience. And my husband, we lived downtown, got appointed to the school board, which really wasn't like part of our plan. I guess it just made sense for us given our commitment and passion to children and to education.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what led you to ERC and founding that company and the important work that you guys are doing there.
Yeah. So I really went to law school for, as I mentioned, for the purpose of helping families, and specifically families who were in poverty and who wouldn't have access to legal resources. So that's always been the purpose and the reason why I wanted to go to school. When I came here, what I learned is a lot of education attorneys represent districts and weren't representing families. And the ones who could represent families obviously have to make a living.
Weren't accessible.
Exactly. Weren't accessible to the majority of families who I felt like needed that.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I had the fortune to become a public defender. And so what I saw as a public defender is I was working mostly with juveniles. So 12 to about 25 was my group of students or kids. And I did county court felonies district court and then also juvenile court. And in that time span, what I saw is that lots of the kids I was representing had disabilities, had low IQs, or we found out had schizophrenia or PTSD, like just anxiety, depression, right? All those things. And so through actually my husband, I met my mentor and co-founder and now business partner, Elizabeth Einen-Kokreda, who had been an education attorney for 20 plus years at the time, had worked as a partner at a law firm representing districts, and then had started representing families in her private capacity, really, obviously, more high-income families. And so in the conversation with her, I was like, hey, this is really what I want to do, but there's really no place to land, And during our conversations, essentially, it came down to, well, what are we going to do about this? What are we collectively? She says that all the time. What do you mean, we?
I'm looking to you.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, let's do it. And so I started working pretty much every Saturday and Sunday. I had a full-time job, and then every Saturday and Sunday amidst like other social calendar stuff. This is pre-kids. So this is in 2017. We would meet and we would plan out what this would look like. And obviously it's completely evolved and transformed like any business does. But we have been able to, at that time, it was, okay, we're going to give pro bono services to families who need it. And, kind of thought it was a side project. And in between, I got pregnant with my daughter. And obviously that, even though it was a project, it became more and more of a passion. And it always, I guess, was a passion. So I would bring my daughter with me on Saturdays and Sundays to, we got a small cubicle at the Community Engagement Center in UNO where we would work. And so she would play and, I would feed her, et cetera. And then that was just part of kind of the mantra. And then COVID happened. And during COVID, I got pregnant again with my son, and lots of things happened personally. My father-in-law died of COVID. There was just a lot of things, obviously, for every single family going on that everyone was trying to navigate, right? Not working from in your offices, et cetera. And a funder came and said, the detriment to families right now who have disabilities is so great because they did not have access. What would it take for you to come on full time? That's a scary question when you are 6 months pregnant, right? And could potentially going to lose your healthcare benefits, et cetera.
Right.
And I really credit my husband for really encouraging me to take the risk because he made it seem possible. Yeah. And so in September of 2020, while I was pregnant, I jumped to Education Rights Counsel full-time.
Okay.
And since then, we've grown significantly. I think at that point, we had less than $100,000 or something. And now we're at $1.4 million organization. I have a staff of 12 that almost six attorneys. Hopefully one of my interns passes the bar. And then we've been able to impact thousands of families across the state and hope to continue to do more. So I really am thankful that my husband gave me the grace to be able to do both of the things. And to be frank, being an education rights counsel, you would think, you're working more, you're running this business, all those things, but it actually enabled me to be a better mother too.
How so?
When my son was born, for my daughter, I was very, very ill. I had preeclampsia and I
with your first?
With my first, and I almost died. Lots of terrible things happened. And then she was in the NICU and, I was dealing with my own. You never really think you have to deal with your own mortality and giving birth at the same time. I think I was grappling with that.
It's very scary.
But having to put her in childcare at 3 months was really, really difficult. Yeah. And so for my son, being able to have him with me while I worked, and he was with me for 6 months, really just changed, I think, my perspective of being a mother and the joy that it can bring and what Education Rights Counsel has done for me. And I think for a lot of my staff are 10-year plus attorneys, but women who crave that flexibility. And I say to my team all the time, family is number one. Your kids are number one.
Yeah.
If you need to go to a field trip, if you need to do this, that's great. We can get our work accomplished. In other times, we can help each other out. And so we've created a culture where that is really the focus, is our families, and then also being professionals.
Well, and what we know is that when parents are able to have that flexibility and show up for their families in a way that aligns with their values, they actually are more productive and energized at work.
And I think that we've seen that tenfold from just what I think in terms of outcomes that we've been able to create, but the quality of representation we've been able to provide. I just think that flexibility is so fundamental, especially as a mother, to have, and that grace, right? To understand, hey, I need to do this for my kid today. Great, bring them to the office.
Yeah.
You know, I bring my kids to the office all the time if they're sick, et cetera. It's just part of what we're able to do.
Because you don't exist in just one silo. You are all of these things, and they can exist together.
Well, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that not only for my staff, but also for our clients, because our clients don't exist in a silo either. What's happening to their families, to their children, especially who have disabilities in schools, and I think we'll talk more about that, but also impacts their jobs, their personal lives, their mental health. And so I really try to look at the families that we represent. We are not so far off. We're very, very similar. And so I like to model that not only for my staff, but for our clients as well.
I love that. Yeah. So I'm super excited to jump into our chat about, what parents need to know about their educational rights for their children, especially when things feel, really hard, really confusing. And I know for me, so my oldest is going into second grade. And even as a person who feels like, so I worked very briefly in the schools as a social worker. And so I know a little bit about the school system, but I still feel really ill-equipped on how to have conversations for my child that has ADHD and how to make sure that she's getting the right support and the right, also being challenged in the ways that I want her to be. So let's just start with a little bit about some of the basics. I guess I think of what I know at the basics. So what do you think are the basics of?
Let me just kind of, talk about education law, right? Okay. It's a very niche area of law, but it kind of encompasses, freedom of religion, First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, et cetera. Obviously, curriculum. We're seeing it play out right now in our federal government, what education law can encompass. But one direct aspect to families is children with disabilities. If you have a child with a disability, they are afforded what is called a free, appropriate public education, which is a higher level of education. All these rights came out of the civil rights movement. So if you're unfamiliar with what is called Brown v. Board, which is a really fundamental landmark case, essentially what happened is that the U.S. Supreme Court said that our schools could not be segregated on the basis of race. And prior to that time, children with disabilities first of all, children that were Black or Latino or Native were separated from their white counterparts. And the U.S. Supreme Court said on the basis of race, schools cannot be segregated. However, children with disabilities at the time were being placed in institutions. It was a very common practice, even here in Nebraska, that you would have a child who maybe had Down syndrome, and the doctor would suggest if you don't want to raise that child, they can go to what was called Beatrice State Home, which still exists, but not in the same capacity as it once did. And so that was a common practice. And individuals with disabilities, after the Brown v. Board case, saw, hey, when they say all, do they mean me, right? Do they mean me? Can I go to school? Can I get a degree? Can I do all these things? And so there was a movement similar to the civil rights movement based off of racial equity that was focused on making sure that there were accommodations for individuals with disabilities. And out of this movement, which applied the same type of techniques, just like Martin Luther King had utilized sit-ins, quiet protest, right? Civil disobedience is what they call it, right? Not fighting, not being violent, etc. One thing being what was called the crip crawl, where individuals with disabilities who were in wheelchairs and in braces and all these things threw those mechanical things to the ground and climbed up the steps of the U.S. state capitol into their Senate offices to demonstrate that they could not even access their government without ramps, etc. And so obviously this had an impact on our Congress. It wasn't just out of the graciousness of their heart. They started what was called Section 504. And so Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act really focuses on specifically accommodations, and not just accommodations in schools, but it focuses on accommodations in the workplace, in healthcare, etc. And so, for instance, and for the moms listening, if you ever were pregnant and able to use an elevator or take a break, right, to go vomit or like do any of those things, those actually were protections that you had under Section 504, because a woman who is pregnant is considered disabled on the basis of in the law. Now, out of Section 504, other laws have come to place. American with Disabilities Act, which also afforded buildings to be accessible. But the real thing that provides mothers, or children, I should say, with disabilities in schools, the protections that they have, is what's called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it is not a civil rights law. It doesn't arise out of the 14th Amendment. It is specifically designated as an education law. So it only applies, unlike 504 and ADA, which apply to people at any time in their life. So you may not be disabled today, but you may be, get into a car accident and then disabled tomorrow, you would be protected under those laws. IDEA only focuses from birth to 19 years old. And specifically what it says is that if you have a disability, you are entitled to not only accommodations, but also you are entitled to direct services. So direct instruction, related services, etc. And there's a whole entire pathway on how to get those rights, but it's basically a heightened level of rights for families.
No, I love that groundwork and that history. That's so much that I had no idea about 504. So when I know there's different pathways, but if there are parents listening, I guess that they're not yet having school-age children. Can you chat a little bit about how I don't know if that's within your wheelhouse as well,
it
and
is.
Like how to access those early networks.
So as I mentioned, IDEA covers birth to 21. And so I think the most common way that this looks is I have a child, they have cerebral palsy. It's likely that they will need extra supports and services, right? You can go here in Nebraska to your local ESU. If you are in the Douglas County, that would be Omaha Public Schools. If you're in Millard, Ralston, or like Papillion La Vista area, Elkhorn, it would be ESU 9. And so you would go there and say, hey, can you please assess my child? They'll do what's called an EDN, like EDN Network does that too, which is the Early Development Network. They will assess the child and then put in what's called an IFSP, which is an individual service family plan. And the intention is to ensure that the family collectively with the child can be providing those resources, and you as the parent can figure that out. Now, obviously, it's not always as obvious as a child who has cerebral palsy. But another indicator would be if you have a child who, for instance, at 3 years old is not speaking more than 100 words. That is a real indicator that there could be your child may be on the spectrum, they may have a speech delay, there could be a litany of different things. Aside from talking to your pediatrician, the other thing that you can do is contact one of these ESUs to get an assessment done. And get those services. And those assessments are completely free.
Very important to mention that those are available to you free of charge, and they come usually, I think, to your home and assess your child and ask a lot of great questions. So we actually did through EDN for my baby, and we didn't qualify for any support services, but they were very thorough because she had like torticollis, and I mean she was just a baby. So even for little one, she was not yet one. We didn't know if maybe she needed like OT or PT so they can have those services are all included as well. And they do a very thorough assessment.
Yeah. And if your child is hard of hearing, or you start doing, you're banging. What are those like tests that you're supposed to do? Like you're like banging,
and if they
pots,
look,
and if they look, et cetera. All these things are, on Instagram or something, right? Of like what you're supposed to do when you're a mom. But if you have any fears about that, there are professionals who do those things, and it is created because of all these laws that we're discussing. They are given for free. So please utilize them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then if we have a child that is of school age and they are not currently receiving any services, and they have a parent that suspects their child might need some extra support, what might be some first steps?
Yeah, so there is, under IDEA, there is a law that is called Child Find. And essentially what it is an obligation of a district, an ongoing obligation, to find, quote unquote, any child who may have a disability. And so what does may have? It could be a child who's failing all their classes, right? A child who at, let's say, 7 years old is not being able to read, maybe mixing up their letters, et cetera. There's lots of a litany of different things that it could be. The school district, either the parent can make a request for an evaluation. It's really important to understand that it's not a medical evaluation. It is an education-based evaluation done by a school psychologist. So it's not, I want to get a diagnosis of ADHD and get my child on medication. This individual would not be able to provide that. What this evaluation does, which here in Nebraska, it's called an MDT evaluation, or a multidisciplinary team evaluation, is to assess whether the child's disability is impacting their access to education. The best thing a mom or parent can do in that space is to request in writing, here's all the evidence points that I have. Dear district, I'm seeing that my child is failing their classes. They seem to be really unsettled. They're getting in trouble a lot. They're being sent to the principal's office or being put out of class. They're seeming to not want to go to school. They're crying, right? All these different litany of things. Put all your evidence points down and in writing, send that to your administrator. That then triggers an evaluation process. Now, some districts have what they call SAT meetings or MTSS. There's lots of different
steps, essentially, to get there.
There are. However, what I would say as a lawyer is that really the law is pretty plain. If you have data to support what you're requesting, the request then triggers what is called procedural due process, which then triggers that within 60 calendar days or 45 school days, an evaluation has to be completed. Oftentimes what we see is that some districts say, well, we don't have a school psych over the summer, so you can wait till August. And what I like to say is, I really appreciate that, but the law doesn't take a summer vacation. And so we try to ensure that children then have access to those evaluations at any time as the law secures.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me as a parent. Like, I might think, oh, it's the end of the school year and I know everyone's going on break. I'm just going to wait. But you're saying they have a right to request a timely
And in fact,
evaluation.
I would say the reason why these timelines are so quick in IDEA is because we only have 18 years with our kids in schools. And it's really not a long time. As you can see, the law moves very, very slowly. And so it is intentional that these timelines are actually quicker because we don't want to lose out on instructional time that would be important for a child to get back on track, quote unquote. The whole goal of IDEA is what's called least restrictive environment, is to ensure that a child with a disability has as much access to, and I'm putting this in quotations, a general education child as possible. And so the whole goal is to make them on the same level as a neurotypical child would be through the supports and accommodations that they need.
And with Ed Rights Counsel, are you assisting families in Nebraska only, or do you assist outside of Nebraska as well?
Currently, we are in Nebraska solely. Okay. So we have multiple programs. Specifically, we do pro bono legal representation. So any family of any income level can contact us and we will provide a consult. And so we get consultations across the state. We then basically assess your case for merit, and then based off of what happens in that case, if we think that there's, things that we can do to help, we will take on that case pro bono. That family does have to be 200% of poverty or below. If you are not, we will recommend you to other attorneys that are here, other advocacy centers that could potentially help you. We also get appointments through the juvenile court system. So something that's really unique to Nebraska solely is that we have innovated with Douglas County, and now we're in Sarpy, Lancaster, Saunders, and Butler counties, and we're expanding statewide, or that's the goal, I should say, as capacity allows, is to get education if you have a family who is involved in the juvenile system, either through an abuse and neglect, or through a probation docket. We can be appointed to represent the education decision maker, so the parent. And we are then appointed to help navigate the education system on behalf of the family. And so a lot of our cases also come through the juvenile court system as well.
Okay, and that's specifically Ed Rights Counsel that is
yes.
managing all of those counties?
Yes.
Okay, and then what is that title, I guess?
It's called an education counsel.
Okay.
If you were requesting that in a court space. And what we do as well is, obviously there's only 6 of us right at the time. It was just myself and Elizabeth doing this, but really we also do training statewide. And so we will give a free training to any family, any group, Rotary, whatever, who wants it, to ensure that you understand, that families understand what their rights are, especially as a parent on behalf of your child. And our goal is to make sure, obviously we're not trying to train you to be an attorney, but our goal is to say, listen, you need just some tools in your tool belt to be successparent, right? And to positively advocate for your child. And obviously that looks different as a medical professional, or as a teacher, or as a parent. And so our trainings are tailored to that, but we do that statewide.
I love that. Yeah. Hey friends, this is Jessie. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a big thank you to our Season 2 sponsor, Diventures Swim School. My kids started weekly swim lessons at Diventures back in February 2025, and honestly, I've been blown away by the growth that I've seen in just a few months. As a water-loving family, water safety is super important to us, and Diventures has given me such peace of mind as a parent. I'm going to share with you just a few of the things that I love the most about Diventures. They offer classes for all ages and stages, starting as young as 2 months all the way up to adults. They have small class sizes with just 4 kids max to 1 adult, so they really do get a lot of that one-on-one support. They have a heated pool, so no battles over getting into cold water. They have flexible class times, which allow for rescheduling when life gets busy or you're going to be out of town. And of course, expert instructors, all certified and truly just amazing with kids. If swim lessons has been on your list, this is your sign. Head on over to diventures.com and find a class that's right for your family. What are some of the organizations, I'm just thinking in my head, that probably reach out to you or could benefit?
Yeah, I mean, what are the ones I did? I just did one at Children's Hospital, so with a whole subset of doctors and their social workers. I'm doing one for a foster care agency. Yes. I work with DHHS and their CFS workers, so they can identify some things. I've worked with teachers unions to train teachers, because first and foremost, I'm an educator. Yeah. And so making sure that teachers understand what the rights of the district are and how to advocate for students in their classroom is really vital. UNO, et cetera. I mean, pretty much anyone and everyone. I think when I started this, I was like, oh, it will be for this subset of people. And I've totally abandoned that philosophy. I'm just like, anybody who wants it,
the knowledge.
Call me.
Yeah. Well, it really is, all parents, want what's best for their kids, but advocating for your children can be very challenging.
Yes.
I think that even myself as a mental health therapist, when I'm advocating for my kid, I like lose all of my logic and reasoning and my skills. And I'm like a fire because, and I don't do it on purpose. I mean, it's like I literally black out and I'm just like focused on what the need is and how do we get that need fulfilled. And so sometimes I even will like tell my husband, like, can you send this email or read the email? Because like, I don't want to I want good relationships. I actually love my child's school, but I just lose all of my skills.
Yes.
And so how can parents advocate for their kids, you know, in your opinion, without seeming difficult?
I think that there's lots of ways that parents can advocate for themselves. The first thing is to understand what your rights are and what they are not, right? I mentioned IDEA and these education laws. One thing to understand is education rights for your child actually flow through you as the parent. You are the one who is afforded those rights to be able to advocate for your child. So especially if your child has a disability, anytime that you are in an IEP meeting, in an evaluation, you are entitled to what's called meaningful participation.
Okay.
And what does that look like? It means that you can have a translator if you do not speak English or if English is not your first language. It means that you can bring anyone that you would like to bring.
Anyone.
Okay. An advocate, a family member, 25 people. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can ask who you want to be there, and you can make those accommodations for you. If you want it at a specific time, you're afforded notice. So they can't just call you and say, oh, we're having a meeting right now this afternoon and you're in the middle of a work meeting.
Right.
They have to coordinate with you to ensure that there's time. Now, if you miss that meeting, especially multiple times, that's a different conversation, right? Have you waived your right, et cetera. So that is one thing I think that families should understand is what is your rights. The other thing is I think that tone and intention is really important. But I do think that, and I say districts versus teachers, because I don't always think teachers fully understand, and I'm speaking as my own self. I think as a teacher, I was given directives oftentimes and then followed those directives and didn't understand maybe the consequences of what I was completely doing or the legal consequences. So sometimes districts will push off things, knowing that you don't know, when many districts will hand you a whole packet of statutes and say, well, these are your rights. Now imagine that you read on a third grade reading level. And I will tell you, we work with doctors and professionals and people who are on, high in terms of socioeconomic levels, and they struggle through this. It is exactly. It's a very difficult, and even attorneys struggle. We get lots of attorneys who are like, I don't understand all this because it's so niche. So I think that obviously tone and intention is important, but I always tell families to put things into writing, to keep a journal, especially if you have a child who has a significant disability, to journal. Hey, today I talked to Mary Lou, whoever, right? And I told her about my child's trach and feeding tubes. This is what they needed. This is what they said, et cetera. So now you have a record for yourself of what communication you've had, and you're not just misremembering. And then the other thing is, I do think that it's different here in Douglas County versus if you are in rural Nebraska. I think being in western Nebraska, you don't have as many resources, and challenging the district can mean losing your job. It can mean your family, being isolated from the community. And so I think the way that you navigate that in different parts of Nebraska versus if you are in Douglas, Sarpy, right, or Lancaster counties is different, because here you have more options. Obviously, we have private schools. There's also options and ways to do what's called option enrollment, to jump from district to district or to request to change districts. And so there's a lot more options. Those options don't exist in places like Hooper, Nebraska, right? Or I'm just throwing Aurora, et cetera. So the way that I would navigate that system looks different for different families, and I want to name that. Yeah,
absolutely. And are those rural schools in Nebraska required to provide the same services and specialists as the larger districts?
It is guaranteed by federal and state law. And so despite not having those resources, what we often say is, okay, well, let's find an opportunity. Obviously, that may mean driving an hour or getting those services, but yes, doing them maybe through technology. But yes, we're going to figure out a way to get those services.
Yeah. What advice for parents that are doing this solo? What advice do you have for them if they are just feeling like the school isn't listening or is minimizing concerns?
I think first, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's a whole entire group of families online, et cetera, who experience this all the time. I think that you want to first talk to your friends, right? Do I seem crazy? Right? And I say that because sometimes, like, for instance, we've had somebody call, for instance, and say, well, I want my child to be transported in, this really, like a Tesla, right? Like, I want my kid to be Well, the law says that you're entitled to transportation, but you don't get, a Porsche or whatever.
Yeah.
You get a Chevy.
Yeah.
So, literally the law says that. And so, like, as long as you don't get to dictate what services you're provided, as long as the district is providing that service. So I think you want to talk to other people, right? Maybe outside of your circle, your pediatrician, et cetera, first. The second thing that I would do is seek help, not necessarily just online, but here in Nebraska. There's many organizations, including Education Rights Council, that can help and assist. PTI is an organization that is federally funded, and it's not attorneys, it's solely advocates and parents.
Okay, like peer support.
Exactly. Who will help and support families in kind of that basic initial processes. When the district is continually saying no, that is the time to probably jump in and seek an attorney.
Okay.
Or if your child obviously is being put at risk of harm, those are the times that Education Rights Council is the right place and space to call us. But if you're saying, hey, I really want an IEP and I just don't know how to navigate this, PTI is a great organization of peer support who can help you navigate through that. But if your kid's being sent home early, it's starting to affect your job, your other children, right? Maybe the child's being bullied. Maybe there's been some assaults, which unfortunately happen. Those are the times to get an attorney involved.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what tips do you have for parents who are like maybe attending, whether it be their first IEP meeting or not their first, but just tips for preparing? Because it can be really
so overwhelming
because you're sitting in a big meeting with lots of different professionals, but they all know each other. And you're coming in with, they may have preconceived notions about you or your family, and your goal really is just to like advocate for your child. What tips
and it can
do
be
you have
so difficult. Yeah. So a couple things. The first thing that I would say is you are entitled to a draft of the IEP.
Okay.
And it's not what's called predetermination. It shouldn't say, oh, and they get XYZ, but it's just a draft of what the recommendations are going to be.
So the draft of the document that you'll be reviewing in the meeting, you can have in advance.
Correct. And wouldn't that make you feel so much more prepared than in that one moment where you're reading it along?
How far in advance are we legally required? Is there?
I would say more than 24 hours. Yeah. Yes, I think that is part of that meaningful participation, that if you get it 24 hours before, that gives you the time and the opportunity to review and seek questions and advice, right? If you are given it in the meeting, it's totally fine. As I said, the rights flow through you. So if you're feeling uncomfortable with like where the meeting's going or have more questions, you can end it. You as the parent can end it and say, you know what, I think we need to come back. A meeting doesn't have to take 45 minutes. In fact, the majority of RIP meetings, and what you should understand is an IEP is a contract. You wouldn't walk out of signing a mortgage, right? Contract in 30 minutes.
Slide this over to me and I sign it.
Exactly. And then not understanding the terms. Absolutely not. And then you're paying, 45% or something. You want to make sure that you understand all the terms. So just like a contract, they also should be defined. Instead of saying as needed, the child will receive XYZ, I like to say will receive this at blank time. Right? So making sure that there's no loose terms in your contract. Okay. Those are the things that you want to review for. And then as mentioned, bring the advocates that you need, talk with who you need to, do the research that you feel like you need to do going into that space. And as I mentioned, ERC, other organizations out there are here to help and assist. And if you feel like you have a group of families who want training or whatever, we will come to your house and train mothers and parents and grandparents, whomever, on what your rights are, because it is confusing and it can feel so empowering just to have some information.
Yes, absolutely. And somebody who has walked that path and, can help instill that confidence in you. What about, so I'm curious about, if this falls under your work with parents in, if their child, I guess any age, how can parents talk with their children about their IEP in a way that makes them feel supported versus less than or different?
Yeah. I think obviously it depends on age. Yeah. What I would say is I think 12 and older are more likely to be able to understand what that is. And how I explain, at least to that age group, is that this document ensures that you get what you need to be able to learn. And so if you feel, I talk to them about the terms, and this is what I did even as a teacher. Here are the terms that you are required. You get breaks, you get this. If that isn't happening, I need you to communicate that to me, right? We have clients who literally in high school will show the school, like, this is my IEP and this is what you need to give me. Because it is a protection document, right? Yeah. For younger children, I think it's easier to explain because there's also this differencing, right? Making kids feel different, making them feel ashamed of what is happening. And maybe many of you have seen this graphic, but I do think it's very helpful, of the baseball field. And it's talking the difference between equality versus equity. And equality being everybody gets a box to see over the fence, and equity is giving the shortest person, 3 boxes to see over the fence. This is really a conversation of what do these accommodations do to get you to that next level? And so with children, especially who are younger, 12 and younger, I would say, here are all the supports that we can provide you, right? Just like some kids need a bigger chair to stand on, or they need, glasses, right, to see, etc. These supports are just like glasses or just like an inhaler, just like that. Yeah. They help support you to be able to learn. And so it's nothing to be ashamed about. And oftentimes, especially with younger kids, when I was an educator, I would bring those accommodations, talk to them about some of those accommodations that they would be receiving. And anytime one of those accommodations helped them, I would say, kiss your brain, because your brain is now growing. Isn't that amazing? Your brain is a muscle, and now it's growing. And because you were able to sit in front, or because you got these extra notes, or because you got speech, et cetera, whatever it is, your brain is growing, and that's so amazing.
Yes. And I love that you were pre-teaching to them, right? Because if I'm just at work and someone brings me an accommodation and I don't know why, or I don't know how it's benefiting me, I'm just like, well, what's wrong with me, right? But if somebody, even I think my daughter got like a desk fidget or something to help her focus. And I was like, great, I will be talking to her about it at home, but who's going to talk to her about it at school before you introduce it? And the counselor's like, oh yeah, I'll talk, I'll chat with her. Great. Cause I don't want it to just be like, why am I different? Or why,
Exactly.
And going over some of the roles of how it's supposed to be.
Not to throw it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that will be her. And then I also just think of when parents are feeling so tired of fighting and just feeling not heard and just want to give up. What would you say to that parent?
There are resources to help you. And honestly, I would say call Education Rights Counsel. If not just to hear somebody else's perspective, right? It is so easy to feel like you are going crazy, that what is happening, that you feel isolated, that no one else is dealing with this. But there are so many families that are going through the exact same thing. that the district, like, you're like, I'm a professional. I know how to navigate the world. Why can't I navigate this thing on behalf of my kid? And especially when you're trying to protect your child, right?
Absolutely.
Or you feel like that's what's at stake. I think ask for help and ask for resources. Don't do it alone.
Yeah. You deserve support. You deserve connection. And that is available in our state from others who just get it.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
What about outside of our state? Are you familiar with any resources for any listeners?
Yeah, there's many different organizations that can be helpful outside of our state. There's one that's called COPA. It kind of talks about the law, but it's very more kind of like generalized, but it's on a national perspective, not Nebraska based. There is disability rights for the United States that you can look up and see what all those things are, especially if your child is transitioning into a guardianship, or you're trying to figure out what does that look like between 18 to adulthood. Some of those resources can be helpful. And then another one is one that's called Rights Law. They are a group of attorneys who sell books, and they can be helpful. I know lots of people are utilize those, but again, they aren't Nebraska specific and don't know the districts as well, but definitely can give you a generalized idea of what's out there.
Great. Yeah. Great. Well, I want to hear a little bit. I feel like Educational Rights Council has had like maybe some fun events either coming up or just tell me.
Yeah, so we have an event coming up on August 27th. So it's our first time we're doing kind of a fundraiser. So anybody and everyone can come. It's going to be down at Brickway Brewery, which is downtown in Omaha. And it's specifically focused on making sure that we understand and protecting Section 504, but also that we're honoring teachers. Yeah. So at this event, we are going to be giving our inaugural, I should say, Deborah Basler-Wisniewski Award. Deborah Basler-Wisniewski was our board president from our inception. She is an educator at UNO and has really ensured that Education Rights Council focuses also on growing and raising up teachers. Yeah. And so this year we're going to be giving an educator an award, which we're so excited. I haven't announced it yet, so I won't announce it here. I'm like, I'm not going to announce it yet. She knows who she is, but so it's going to be super exciting. And we also are going to be selling whiskey that is ERC. I'm not a whiskey drinker, but my husband really does. I don't know. I had to bring all these people who like whiskey into my world to be like, taste this, because it tasted like poison to me. Oh, yeah. But for those who are, that it's going to be an ERC, Section 504 whiskey that is specifically focused on bringing more training to families just like this.
Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Yeah. So that's Raise the Bar, August 27th. And anyone can attend. Awesome. So it's 5 to 7. It's just a happy hour. You can come in. There's food, there's drinks, and it's really just about having meaningful conversations with individuals who are going through the exact same thing as you, and ensuring that every child can stay in school and thrive, because education is really the great equalizer and is what I think the fundamental aspect of being an American. And so trying to provide access to everyone is so vitally important. Yes, agreed. And if folks are looking to connect more with ERC, where can they learn more or follow all the awesome work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, we have social media, so you can follow us at Ed Rights Council on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. But we also have a website, which is educationrightscouncil.org. And I will say counsel spelled COUNSEL, like legal counsel, not like student counsel.
Got it.
Okay. And also you can call me if you find me on the street, whatever. I mean, come and chat. And if you want our organization to come and talk with a group of families that you have, if you've been sitting home isolated, I think now is the time to reach out, and you can find people who are going through the same thing and can help you navigate.
I love that. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us on Omaha Mom Talks and reminding moms that their voice matters.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love it. All right, guys. Well, if you found this episode helpful, please share, like, subscribe, and please keep taking care of yourself. And we'll see you next time on Omaha Mom Talks. Bye.
Bye.
Omaha Mom Talks. Real moms, authentic conversations, no filter needed.